Look at this house. And this one. And this one too. 3 houses in a line. 3 dads and 3 moms. 3 sets of siblings. 3 cats, 2 dogs, and a bunny rabbit named Bugs. While it might be true to say that at one time the children who were raised in these houses were the best of friends, you couldn't say that now. No, that thing happened that always happens. They grew apart. Which is really to say, they grew up. And yet here's where they once again find themselves, living at home amidst the relics of their prepubescent and teenage years. The reasons for each of their separate returns are different enough, and will be explained shortly. But first you must know that it is not because they are inept, at least not traditionally, or particularly unmotivated. They just didn't know where else to go. This is George. George. Though he was named for his grandfather on his mother's side, George never met the man, nor the man him. And though George wouldn't realize it for several years, the reasons for his grandfather's somewhat premature passing are the very things in which George is currently engaged. Vice, lack of self-control, and the like. When George was older and understood enough to realize that he did not have an old gray man to take him to the park or show him how to bait a lure, he would inquire about this very present absence. The answer was always the same and came from his mother. Your granddad is in a better place. To which George would always think but never say. But where? George won't find out for a few years, but his college days took their toll, and he had a weakened heart. At first, he convinced himself that the small palpitations and post-smoke racings were just signs he was living fully, and at one time, he may have been right. But as is the case with things of this nature, these maladies would worsen and cause him severe health problems and hospital stays throughout his 30s and into his 40s, finally claiming him on March 19th, 2049. He would leave behind a wife and twin boys. The boys loved him very much. The wife loved the boys.
Hey George, it's Jill. I heard you were back in town for a while. My mom ran into your mom at the pharmacy. Well, anyway, I'd love to get together. I'm home too.
This isn't George's girlfriend. She never really was. And though George hadn't called her or much thought of her since his 4.5 years at the university, he could easily recall the nights they spent sneaking around, discovering which body parts did what. While it's true that George's explorations of the female anatomy would continue with much frequency and little satisfaction throughout college, Jill never really had much of a taste for the sport after George left town. She would tell her friends, it just isn't the same. Secretly, George felt similar.
George! Dinner!
And what of Rebecca?
Hollers. So wings at the first pitch. Ground ball to third, over to second, in time, and on to first. Hey, double play.
Hey, how was school?
Fine.
Ends the rally and the inning. 3 hits, 1 run, no man left on base.
Doggy in bed.
2 seconds, please.
After 3, we're tied at 2. More baseball after these messages.
Rebecca just got home from her Tuesday-Thursday sophomore biology class at Southeast Community College. She spent her freshman year at the big state school with all her friends, and was even a first-round initiate into Tri Delta. But after her mother died suddenly in the spring from an allergic reaction to anesthesia, she decided it best to come home and help her dad. To say her father didn't exactly reject Rebecca's willing aid would be an understatement, as was just witnessed. There's the funny one, and the pretty one, and the one most likely to get pregnant, drop out, and work at the local drive-in. Rebecca was the chubby one. Some of the meaner ones would whisper Big Becca when she passed them in the halls. The meanest one actually said it loud enough for her to hear. For the majority of her adolescence, she didn't mind it, or even necessarily realize it. But as that cruelest of inventions, middle school, began to take its toll on the poor girl, it was the only thing she recognized about herself. Her plan? Well, first, lose the weight. Second, win homecoming queen. Amazingly, and against all predictions, she did both. Though her methods were a little controversial, the result was rather surprising, even if she still did feel the urge to ram her index and middle fingers deep into her throat after breakfast, lunch, and dinner. In spite of a hush-hush stay at Quail Hollow, the local mental ward for juveniles, and a few pounds that had recently reclaimed residence on particular places of her still bony body, Rebecca had nearly kicked her bulimic habits. Nearly.
Back! Down!
The journaling was a coping mechanism she learned while at Quail Hollow. The dogs were a gift Rebecca's uncle had given her dad after her mother died. The well-intentioned replacement somehow never really replaced anything. In fact, after the puppies became dogs, Rebecca's dad curiously lost interest in their supposed healing powers. And so here's where Rebecca finds herself most afternoons. Feeding 2 dogs, missing her mom, and subsequently, the irony of the whole thing. And finally there's Barrett, who upon coming home for Christmas his freshman year of college, just never went back. Barrett's father was recently diagnosed with stage 2 prostate cancer. He would be fine, but after reading a pamphlet entitled "It Could Happen to You, Preventing the Nearly Preventable," Barrett became obsessed with doing just that. After the pamphlet failed to satisfy Barrett's quest for a cure from a cancer he wasn't even close to developing, Barrett found himself roaming online forums and message boards for more practical prevention measures. The most heavily repeated practice, and the one which Barrett clearly didn't mind participating in, was regular masturbation. He also read somewhere along the way that every red-blooded male had approximately 3,500 orgasms, give or take, before their reproductive well dried up, which for some reason Barrett took to heart. Barrett determined to do 2 things. 1, prevent his father's cancer from someday finding him, and 2, not reach that dreaded 3,500th climax. So Barrett would fill up a shoebox full of crusty tissues, which at this point he calculated as averaging between 50 and 55 samples apiece, record the data, and light the box on fire. Soon though, regardless of how pure these intentions may have originally been, Barrett found himself quite the addict. 22 disintegrated shoeboxes later, which would add up to some 1,210 emissions, and Barrett was starting to fudge the numbers. Lately, for every 3 tissues, only 1 would make it in the box.
was supposed to pull out,
But he didn't?
Yobi, have you met Allison yet?
No, I don't think so.
So I guess I have to wait about 2 weeks and hopefully, figure out something.
Yeah.
I'm Barrett.
Hey, Allison. Oh, seriously, dude?
And so these three people, these products of American sprawl and suburban pomp, the fading frat boy, the local beauty queen, and the awkward and frustrated sex addict, find themselves living life between the lines, wishing they were happy, not understanding why they aren't. And so George prays and drinks, and Rebecca eats and regrets it, and Barrett watches pornography. And to think, it's just 4:37 p.m. on a Tuesday evening, and